So when we look in the Old Testament, we find that God had set up a sacrificial system. Even before the Passover, even before the nation of Israel became a nation, we see that God had set up a sacrificial system. In fact, God is the very first one that offered a sacrifice, and he did it on behalf of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. It was through their sin that caused the very first death, the death of that animal that they were covered by, and it was through the shedding of the blood of that animal that then brought about the redemption of sin. But the Old Testament sacrifices, we see them all over the Old Testament, and they were very important and very prominent in Jewish life and Hebrew life. But all they did, they didn't blot out sin. They simply passed over sin, and they passed over sin, and they passed over sin. And so as we look at that, the bloodshed, could you just imagine there in the temple of sacrifice after sacrifice after sacrifice being made, and those priests must have just been absolutely covered in blood, and there must have been just a river of blood that was flowing out of that tabernacle and that temple. So as we begin to think about that, why is that so ugly? And I believe the reason why it's so ugly, and even as we look at the cross and we look at the battered body of Jesus Christ and we look at his shed blood, we understand that life is in the blood, and so that's the reason that the blood is shed. But why is it so ugly? Why is it so brutal? I believe it's so ugly and it's so brutal, and it's even difficult for us to think about. I believe the reason why is because God is letting us know how ugly sin truly is. And so we have those Old Testament examples that bring us up to the New Testament, that make us aware of what it is exactly that Jesus did on the cross of Calvary. So when we look at the Old Testament, we need to view the Old Testament through the lens of the New Testament, and we understand why those sacrifices were made. Now, they didn't blot out sin. They didn't have that capability. They were imperfect to do that, but Jesus blotted out sin. Jesus wiped away sin. Jesus removed sin as far as the east is from the west, to where it is absolutely gone. But the brutality of the Old Testament sacrifices we see, for thousands sometimes, tens of thousands sometimes, animals were sacrificed. What a bloody mess that must have been. It makes us aware of how ugly and vile and putrid sin truly is. It's the very thing that Jesus went to the cross to pay for on behalf of you and me. The ugliness of sin that Jesus so willingly shed his blood to redeem.